The enthusiasm of Jesus. I came to cast fire upon the earth. Luke 12:49. It's strange to think that the word enthusiasm isn't mentioned in the English New Testament or the Greek Testament. However, the New Testament is the most passionate book of all, and Jesus is the most passionate person. The word enthusiasm is avoided for a reason. In the past, it had negative associations. In the pagan world, enthusiasm meant being ecstatic or possessed by a god. Enthusiasts were often seen as fanatics or even madmen. The gospel writers didn't like this word, so they didn't include it in their writings. Today, enthusiasm is seen as something positive. It's having a strong and excited mind, spirit, and soul. It's passion, heat, and fire. Even though the word isn't used, the concept is present. Jesus burns with intense passion. His words are like sparks that ignite great fires. When Jesus was a boy, he visited Jerusalem with his family and got left behind while listening to scholars discussing religious matters in the temple. He was so absorbed in the discussion that he forgot about the day and time, his family, and his friends. He was completely engrossed in the topic until his mother found him and reminded him that he had left his place in the caravan going to Galilee. This experience in the temple shows us that Jesus was sensitive and easily influenced, capable of being deeply passionate. When Jesus was 30 years old, he appeared before us again, this time being baptized by the powerful preacher John in the River Jordan. Immediately after the baptism, Mark tells us that he was driven by the Spirit into the wilderness. This word driven is meaningful. Jesus is filled with emotions after his baptism, and he can't stay near people's homes. He needs to go to deserted places where he can think about the strange things that have happened to him and contemplate his next steps. From that moment on, we see a man who is constantly driven. Even as a boy, he used the word must to express the intensity of his feelings. He always felt the need to fulfill his father's mission. They wanted him to stay in Capernaum, but he couldn't. He said, "I must preach the gospel of the kingdom of God to other cities as well." They wanted him to stay away from Jerusalem because it was dangerous, but he said, "I must go to Jerusalem. I have a baptism to undergo, and I can't rest until it's done." He knew that his life would be short, so he kept saying, "I must do the work that God sent me to do while it's still daytime, because the night will come when no one can work." We can see the intensity of his life in his habit of praying. He prayed all the time. He woke up early in the morning to have more time to pray and stayed up late at night to have more hours to talk to God. Sometimes he didn't even sleep, spending the whole night on a hilltop under the stars, pouring out his heart to God. He was enthusiastic in his prayers, and that's why he was zealous in his work. People were amazed by the amount of work he did. Sometimes he didn't even have time to eat. Even when he tried to take a break, he couldn't escape the crowds that followed him. His words were filled with energy and passion. We can feel his heart beating in expressions like, "I haven't seen such great faith, not even in Israel. Wow, woman, your faith is amazing. Thank you, Father. And oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often?" Even after 2,000 years, our hearts still leap when we hear these words. The passing centuries haven't extinguished their fire. But it's not just what Jesus says, but also what people who touched him say that allows us to see into his passionate heart. Mark tells us that there was a time in Jesus' life when he worked so hard that his friends thought he was acting a little strange. "He is beside himself," they said. This phrase means that he was a little off, or not quite himself. He wasn't completely out of his mind, but he was not in perfect balance either. His dedication to doing good was so intense and unprecedented in Palestine that people thought he was crazy. Even his enemies boldly claimed that he was possessed by a devil and mad. Jesus made this impression multiple times. When Paul had the same kind of passion, Festus exclaimed, "Paul, you are mad." Enthusiasm seems crazy to those who can't feel it. The crowds also witnessed the intensity within Jesus. Wherever he went, he stirred people up. They crowded around him on land and water. They pushed him up hillsides and packed the houses where he stayed. They surrounded him as he walked through the streets. The excitement often reached a fever pitch, causing Jesus to slip away and hide. Towards the end of his life, the crowds became wild with joy, shouting, singing, and throwing their clothes on the ground for Jesus' animal to walk on, like a carpet for a king's triumphant procession. A person can only ignite a crowd if their own soul is ablaze. When we see some people cheering and adoring while others are angry and cursing, it's clear that we are in the presence of someone whose heart burns like a furnace and radiates heat wherever they go. An even stronger proof of this is seen in the character of the men who were drawn to Jesus as his close friends. The apostles were all passionate individuals. Don't believe the pictures that depict them as weak and pale men. They were strong, vibrant, and mighty individuals, filled with fire and passion. They were attracted to Jesus because they saw in him a man who satisfied them. Peter had a fervent soul, and his words flowed out like molten lava. John and James were known as sons of thunder. The disciple whom Jesus loved was so passionate that he wanted to burn down a whole town that insulted his master. One of the disciples was a zealot, a member of the most radical political party in Palestine. The zealots despised Rome with such intensity that they could hardly sleep, and no zealot would have been attracted to a cold-hearted and weak individual. Simon only joined the apostles because Jesus had the fire that the zealots admired. Judas, too, had a volatile nature. His guilt consumed him, and his cry of, "I have sinned," is one of the most thrilling moments in history. If there was anyone in the group who lacked enthusiasm, it was Thomas. But even he was so devoted to Jesus that he said to his companions, "Let's go and die with him during a crisis." That was the sentiment of all the apostles. They loved Jesus with such intense devotion and selflessness that they were willing to lay down their lives for him. A person cannot win and keep the fervent devotion of strong individuals unless they have a soul that burns with passion. Jesus was constantly surrounded by enthusiasts because he himself was enthusiastic. If you ask what caused this enthusiasm, you will find that it has three roots. Firstly, Jesus had a sensitive nature. He was finely tuned and had delicate nerves. People vary greatly in how they are made. Some are rough, unfeeling, and heavy. They experience sensations, but not intensely. They have emotions like vegetables. Others, like Jesus, are as finely tuned as a musical instrument. Every breeze that touches them makes them vibrate and produce sweet sounds. Jesus was one of these people. His body was formed from the finest clay, and it was never hardened or desensitized by sin. On the Mount of Transfiguration, his soul shone through his body so brightly that his disciples were awestruck. In the Garden of Gethsemane, his agony was so intense that his sweat looked like drops of blood in the moonlight. At one point, his face shone so brightly that people fell backward to the ground. There was a powerful force in nature that could ignite a passion in people, a belief in God and in the potential of humanity that set the nation ablaze. Jesus understood that the creator of the universe is like a loving father, with a caring heart at the center of everything, extending his love and care to all. This truth was crystal clear to Jesus, unlike others who only saw it vaguely. Because God is the Father of all, every person is his child. He created and loves them all and desires to save them. No matter who they are or where they are, they cannot escape God's love and care. All people are brothers, and the greatest joy in life is to help and support one another. Jesus saw this clearly, unlike others who struggled to see it. With such a profound understanding of God and humanity, it's no wonder his soul burned with passion. From his passionate nature and vision, a steadfast and fiery purpose emerged. Jesus saw a great battle raging between right and wrong, light and darkness, good and evil, God and the devil. In such a crisis, Jesus knew he had to wholeheartedly join the fight, fighting for the glory of God and the well-being of his fellow human beings. When you combine a sensitive and passionate nature, a clear and magnificent vision, and an unwavering and fiery purpose, you have the ingredients that create the divine flame known as enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is a beautiful thing. Throughout history, whenever people have deviated from the usual path, it's because they were captivated by someone burning with enthusiasm. Enthusiasm comes in different forms, but each form is captivating. There's physical enthusiasm, the excitement felt in our bodies. It's the kind of enthusiasm that ignites at sports events, like the ancient Greek athletic contests and modern football games. It may not be the highest form of enthusiasm, but it's thrilling, and people will go great lengths to experience that excitement. Intellectual enthusiasm is even higher, the fervor felt in the pursuit of truth. This is the enthusiasm of explorers, inventors, scholars, those who dedicate their lives to uncovering new knowledge. They consider their lives insignificant compared to the pursuit of knowledge. When we read about an explorer dying in a remote land or a scientist sacrificing their life for a medical breakthrough, we are struck with awe. We sense the presence of something divine. Above this is aesthetic enthusiasm, a passionate pursuit of beauty. There are individuals who have an insatiable hunger for beauty that others can't understand. They see beauty everywhere, even when their eyes are closed. They appreciate art and its history, recognizing the sacrifices made by artists who kept painting despite failing eyesight. Others have an unquenchable thirst for harmony, seeking beautiful melodies and sounds. Music becomes their temple, and they are willing to sacrifice everything for the pursuit of heavenly harmonies. The biographies of artists and musicians are filled with stories of labor, sacrifice, disappointment, and poverty as they chase after transcendent forms of expression. Before these martyrs of passion, we stand in reverence, recognizing the holiness of their dedication. But above all these, there is a fire that burns in souls who are in love with God. Their highest ambition is to know, serve, and glorify Him. This ambition sets their souls ablaze and cannot be extinguished. This was the enthusiasm of Jesus. He reached the highest level of passion and enthusiasm. He lived and existed in the presence of the eternal. From beginning to end, he saw the greatness of doing what is right, loved the beauty of being holy, and lived for the glory of God. It's not surprising then that Jesus' religion is often associated with the word fire. John the Baptist said he could only baptize with water, but someone greater would come to baptize with fire. Those who came to John were wet, but those who came to Jesus were on fire. According to Luke, on the day of Pentecost, it seemed like everyone had a flame on their forehead, symbolizing the passion of this new religion. When John was on the island of Patmos thinking about Jesus, he saw him with eyes like flames of fire and feet like shiny brass. He heard Jesus speaking to the Laodiceans, saying, "I wish you were either hot or cold, but because you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth." You can enjoy drinking cold water or water heated to a certain temperature, but the stomach rejects lukewarm water. The beloved disciple doesn't hesitate to say that Jesus finds lukewarm Christians nauseating. Unfortunately, there are many lukewarm Christians, individuals who are indifferent, neutral, and neither passionate nor cold. They don't oppose, they just approve, but approval alone cannot ignite the world. Approval is a mere nod of the intellect, but enthusiasm is the soul's smile. What is the reason for Christians lacking enthusiasm? It's because they are saturated and soaked by the cold drizzle of worldly distractions. Along with this decline in their nature comes a fading of their understanding of God as a loving Father and all people as part of the same family. Because their vision is clouded, their sense of purpose also diminishes, and their soul fails to ignite. So what should we do? Let's turn back to God, who is zealous and passionately loving, to the point of sacrificing His only Son. If we are not ignited in the presence of such a powerful message, it's because we have a heart of stone. But God, who knows us well and remembers our weakness, has promised to remove our hard hearts and give us hearts that feel.